we say a very warm welcome to a certified residential rental specialist. His name is Grant Ray, and he is just an amazing guy and willing to talk to us about some of those things that landlords are obliged to do as per the Rental Housing Act. Good morning, Grant, and thanks for your time, buddy. Thanks for coming through to our studios.
I'm delighted to be here.
So, Grant, let's kick it off. Help us just in terms of this. The whole thing of landlords and tenants, it can become a sticky one. Not everybody has got a great landlord. Some landlords are sick and tired of their tenants. How do we find a balance and how do we grow and move forward?
Well, it's interesting to note that in South Africa, as many as 70% of rentals are actually without an agent. Ooh. So they're private rentals, landlord to tenant. Sometimes I'm finding landlords are taking the law into their own hands. And I know your listeners have short time this morning, so I'm going to give you quick 6 things that landlords have to do. Let's go into them. Number 1, they can't discriminate against you, not on the basis of gender, of race, of religion, of sexual orientation. The second is if you ask them to give you a lease in writing, and I would advise never having a lease that's verbal, they have to give you a lease in writing if you ask. The third is the money. They have to give you some kind of a receipt for your money, whether that's a receipt or a statement of sort. And when it comes to the deposit, your landlord is obliged to pay you interest. So they have to have it in at least an interest-bearing account that's equal to a savings account in South Africa, in a bank in South Africa. Yeah. Then when it comes to moving you in, they have to do a joint incoming inspection with you and a joint outgoing inspection with you, else they might not be able to make deduction of your deposit monies. Then privacy. You have the right to privacy in your lease. They can't unduly search your property and they can't access the property without giving you due notice to access. Then they have to perform necessary maintenance. The property has to be habitable. And these are the main things that landlords tend to contravene. If your landlord is being naughty, you can approach the Rental Housing Tribunal. It's a free service. You can go onto capetown.gov.za, search the Rental Housing Tribunal, and fill out an easy form. There's a drop-down menu for all the contraventions that the landlord has made, and you can then lodge a case with the Rental Housing Tribunal, and it's free.
That's brilliant. Really fantastic. I want to just zoom in on the one that you mentioned towards the end, that thing of the landlord needing to maintain the premises and so forth. But I mean, if somebody's living inside the premises, they can also damage and things like that.
So there is an obligation on a tenant
to
maintain the interior of the property. In other words, if you're using the property, if you're using cupboards and the hinges start deteriorating, wield a screwdriver. This is not something you're going to phone your landlord for. When I say the landlord needs to maintain the property, it needs to be adequately painted. They need to attend to things like mold and moisture problems. All right. But when it comes to the bathroom, make sure as a tenant, you're ventilating the bathroom. If you start seeing mold forming when you were handed a perfectly clean bathroom, then use an easy Jig solution or buy a mold buster and clean it up. You need to hand back the property in the same condition as what it was given to you.
Okay. And hence also the one that you said about that the landlord and the tenant together inspect the property before the tenant moves in. And then again,
when the tenant... You have to create a baseline of the condition of the property. And this is why that incoming inspection is so important, and that you have a baseline record so that at the end, the landlord can say, it was like this, it's now no longer like this, and we're going to make deduction off your deposit. We could talk about the obligations of tenants in a later show.
I think that's a very good idea. Any questions that you've got, quickly drop us a WhatsApp 061-798-1075. Grant is here. He is a certified residential rental specialist and just so helpful with regard to that. Again, as a tenant, if I've got an issue with my landlord, I go to the capetown.gov.za website and I look for
the Rental Housing Tribunal, or you can simply search Rental Housing Tribunal Western Cape.
Rental Housing Tribunal Western Cape.
They're very fair towards tenants, and the process is a little bit long-winded because it's a free service, but you can find some kind of recourse there.
And then for the landlords, I'm sure we've got some landlords listening to us, a bit of advice for them if they've got a tenant that they are struggling a little bit with.
So a landlord can also approach the rental housing tribunal. However, there are limited powers at the rental housing tribunal. They, for example, cannot issue an eviction order. There, you have to go to a magistrate or a higher court.
Like, so Leslie Ann is just saying that she's a landlord and she feels as though tenants are abusing her. So if you are a landlord and if you feel that you're in that situation, how would you navigate that?
So it's really important to have boundaries. So it's important, number one, as a landlord, that you understand the provisions of the Rental Housing Act. In other words, what your obligations are. Thereafter, you need to have, I often advise landlords to have some kind of house rules, or when you check them in, say, listen, this is the understanding between us. This is a real give and take relationship. Sometimes it's not necessarily black and white. Fairness at all times. Remember, there is a person living in your property. And for you as a tenant, remember, the lifeblood of this landlord's income is invested in the property you're now living in. So everyone needs to be reasonable in this situation.
Definitely. And then Michael has sent through a short voice note that we're going to quickly play.
So essentially, the deposit would have to be transferred from the previous owner to the new owner. And the new owner steps into the shoes of the landlord. The same deposit, together with all the interest that it has accrued, has to be passed on to an interest bearing account with the new owner. So the new owner would essentially be in breach of the agreement if you had paid a deposit and now your deposit has vanished into thin air.
True story.
And then Grant, what about increase of rent? How often can that be done?
So it's the first port of call is always you look at the lease. In other words, if the lease term is from point A to point B, it cannot be escalated during that period.
Brilliant.
Some leases have a built-in renewal escalation clause. They say on the anniversary, it's going to increase by 8%. You can hold the landlord to that. If it's silent on it, not more than 80, but not less than 40 days before the end of the lease period, your landlord needs to say, I'm going to be increasing your rental, so that you have time to either give notice and move or say, yes, I agree to that escalation. The tribunal, by the way, is averse to escalations beyond 10%, although there's nothing written in law as to how much that escalation can be.
Interesting. We're definitely going to get Grant back in studio because this has been fantastic. We see some more questions than that coming through. But Grant, thank you so much for your time. It's so helpful.
Delighted to be here.
There we go. And if you missed it or you caught the tail end and you want to get the whole deal, go to our Facebook page, go to our YouTube channel. You'll find it all there.
I've also got a TikTok channel that you can go to called Go to Grant.
Go to Grant.
I like that. Go
Lots
to
of
Grant.
videos there for you to see.